Hey guys, what's up? It's me, MC Matador here, and today I am bringing you part 6 of my top 150 coaster Countdown Calamity series. I have put this series on hold ever since I came back from my tri-park tour that I've put up the 3 synopses for. So if you want to watch those, just go check my channel history or check my summaries, park analysis, and synopsis playlist. With that out of the way, let's just get this going with number 75. I left off at X2 at number 76 to ruffle a few feathers that I thought were tucked. Number 75 is Backlot Stunt Coaster. Now, this one does have a net loss of 5 percentage points, or percentile points, which is pretty severe. Like, this ride is 5% worse than what I originally thought it was when I went back in 2017 to Kings Island to re-ride this thing. Still fun, very underrated. It's pretty smooth. There's some good forces in that triple upward helix and some really fun theming. It's like I would love to go back to Kings Island to ride it again, and now with Orion as part of the pack, I would definitely love to get back to Kings Island and. I can probably give some concise thoughts, because this is a coaster that kind of bounced around in my opinions. I will say that I did rank this thing too highly in 2016, kind of coming to my senses. Moving on, we have Hurler at Carowinds. Now, this one also did suffer a net loss of 2 percentage points. I do realize, especially as of age as a coaster enthusiast, since 2016, I've developed more of a craving for intensity and airtime and forceful rides, that whether it's on the negative, positive, or lateral side. And this ride packs none of those. It's basically dull, forceless, but it's still pretty smooth, and I had fun with it while I did. And it did take a hit from the past years as I've learned more about myself, but I still can make do with what it has here. I'm still on the boat that thinks that Carowinds should build a GCI in the former Dinosaurs Alive spot, and then turn this into RMC fodder. It would be a fantastic rounding out of their lineup, because this is their only wooden coaster, and it's pretty freaking weak. Boring, almost. But I still make do with it, and it's still a fun ride. Number 73 is a new Challenger, the first one of the episode, and one of the most underrated, biggest surprise coasters that not a lot of people have ridden I've probably ever been on. Yankee Cannonball at Canopy Lake. When I first went on to Yankee Cannonball, I think I talked about this in my Canopy Lake synopsis as well. I wasn't really expecting much out of this thing, but this thing delivered. It's smooth, pretty smooth, definitely much smoother than you'd expect from a coaster nearly a century old. It's got some good forces, airtime, the trains are comfortable. They do only run one train, which is problematic, but I think most everything at Canopy Lake, except for Untamed, runs one train. But I definitely was very surprised on how well this thing was running. It just didn't look like much, but it ended up being so much more. I'm genuinely shocked at how good this thing was, and Canopy Lake has done an excellent job maintaining this old classic coaster. And I just rode this last year as well, so my memories are pretty fresh, considering the disappointment of Untamed and the expected failure of Canopy Corkscrew and all of its glorious obsolescence. Number 72 is Racer at Kings Island. Now, there's not a single net change on this, but I do appreciate this more, especially with competition and better coasters cluttering up the top tiers and high tier coasters. And I think this is one of the best vintage wooden coasters out there, and it's actually credited for starting one of the great coaster races in Kings Island's history. So, it's decently smooth. It's a little rough around the edges, but still decently smooth. Good, classic, traditional wooden coaster, classic airtime. It's got a type of airtime that's only distinguishable to vintage or classic wooden coasters. And pretty frequently races. I know that some coasters, even American Eagle back home at Great Americas this season, is very infrequently racing. But I think Racer is one of the few coasters that still consistently races with a great degree of popularity. I was able to get full train races on several occasions on this ride, and that's becoming more of a rarity as parks have staffing problems and all that. They just think they can get away with bare bones, Twisted Colossus and American Eagle especially. Number 71 is Comet at Hershey Park. Barely any sort of net loss, mostly because I have not ridden this thing like everything at Hershey Park since 2015, but I still look back upon this thing as a fun, vintage wooden coaster that will never cease to thrill guests and be a safe and family fun ride for all ages. It's got a modest height requirement, and it's just overall really good. Packed really tightly in the neighboring Skyrush, which I wasn't able to find many good images of Comet and Skyrush intertwined. It was an added bonus because Skyrush, instead of tearing this thing down with Skyrush to have a little more room, they just kept it, which explains the bizarre layouts of Skyrush stations and how you exit and enter on the same side rather than on different sides. Because if you were to exit on the opposite side, you would be running right into Comet. Like, you can only exit on that side if you can phase through solid matter or punch a pedestrian-sized hole in the supports. Neither of which are a good idea. Or possible even to begin with. Number 70 is Sierra Sidewinder, a sleeper hit if I've ever seen one. My first max spinner I ever rode. I've done Mauer spinners, I've done the Zamperla Wild Mice, or Reverchon, or whatever it was. But this is back in 2017, this was my first max spinner I ever did, and my goodness, it was super good. Me, my younger brother, my younger cousin, and my older cousin were all together for this trip. We unbalanced the weight with the two heaviest people on diagonals, and it was just insanity. We were in the back car, too. This thing does have pretty bad capacity. 2 trains and only 16 people per train, because there's 4 cars with 4 people each. But this thing, despite the long line I had to wait in, like most everything at Knott's Berry Farm, it packed more thrills than Jaguar and Pony Express combined, and was seriously a really good compact coaster, and I don't understand why parks haven't built more of these max spinners. They're better than the Gerstlauers, they're better than the they're better than the Zamperlas, they're better than even the Mauers in certain points, and with things like Turbulence and Long Island, I really look forward to riding some of those if Sierra Sidewinder was anything like it. Number 69 is Laff Trakk. Now, I did just say that Sierra Sidewinder rode better than Mauer spinners, but I think Laff Trakk just packs something extra with the indoor things, air-conditioned, a well-themed queue, and decent efficiency. I mean, if I were to ride things like Phoenix at Adventureland or Steel Dragon at Valdemar, I would probably find Sierra Sidewinder to be better than those, but Laff Trakk just packs that extra theming and the in-the-dark chaotic experience. That, and I have not ridden it since its debut year in 2015, and I very fondly remember this as a blissfully chaotic and really just guilty fun experience. Like, a lot of the coasters you're going to see on this part, going from last part even into next part, will all be like guilty pleasure coasters, or coasters that are like good, but not great. Moving on, we have Cobra's Curse, a net loss of 8 percentage points. If you think that the loss for Backlot Stunt Coaster was bad, you haven't seen, well, you're looking at it right now. Cobra's Curse has taken a nosedive of, I think, the biggest loss of the entire series thus far, of 8 percentage points. My first impressions of this ride were excellent. Well-themed queue, air-conditioned, really efficient, despite some rather frequent breakdowns because I rode it in its debut year. Very unique elements. That near miss with the Cobra on the outward bank turn is super good. But really, other than the elevator lift and some of the theming in the station, and especially that outer bank turn, the rest of the ride is just bland. You go forward for a part, and then you go backwards for another part, and then you start spinning, which is a finale of like 3 or 4 overbank turns, and you don't even really spin that much. It's amazing all the technical bits that went into this ride, but the ride experience, especially in the long run, is just mundane. It's boring almost. It's a good, well-themed coaster that I do think will appeal more to the younger demographics. And I still think this thing is obviously a quality ride, but this thing I hope can take a bit more of a side burner with things like Tigress and RMC Gwazi opening up at Busch Gardens Tampa since I was last there in 2016. Moving on, we have number 67, Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios Hollywood, the only coaster. Well, I intended to ride at Universal Hollywood. I ended up with the Flight of the Hippogriff credit because my younger cousin is a huge Harry Potter nerd. It was a solid, well-themed indoor roller coaster with like a common-theme air-conditioned queue, and since it's indoors, it's an air-conditioned building, so getting out of that LA heat was really nice. And I do think the layout the layout was solid. It did have some forces going both forward and backwards. The launch was decently intense for it being a family coaster, and the theming, as expected, is excellent. Screens, physical props. There's a scarab wall towards the back where they actually like literally mess with your senses by blasting fine nozzled air jets onto your legs to make it give the impression that there's bugs crawling up your legs in the scarab wall. Lots and lots of lights and cardboard cutouts and just good stuff all around. And the finale is very powerful. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to try and spoil more than I already did. And on that, and also my memory's kind of prolapsing because I'm just trying to... Universal Studios Hollywood as a whole wasn't very memorable. Moving on, we have number 66. We got another California coaster. There's been plenty on this thing. Montezuma's Revenge. A vintage, classic, absolutely must-be-preserved coaster for decades, millennia, forever history to come. The last remaining shuttle loop coaster in the United States, if I remember correctly as well. Unique, vintage, antique, but still absolutely amazing. The vertical loop, due to its circular nature, is very forceful, and going through it backwards was a sensation I've only felt on Montezuma's Revenge. Going through that circular loop backwards, leading the charge, is one of the single weirdest but also pleasant sensations I've ever had on any of these coasters. The launch wasn't intense, as I believe it's a flywheel launch, so similar to like tire drives on modern coasters. And the vertical spikes did have some decent negatives on there. Not as good as Intamin Impulse coasters, but they have some decent negatives, and both spikes are really good. I think I prefer that back spike as well. Like I said earlier, I hope this ride is maintained for years to come, and many, many, many more enthusiasts and history buffs alike will be able to ride this piece of history, especially since Schwarzkopf coasters are a dying breed, and many of their flat rides are already on their way out. Moving on, we have number 65, the Bat, with surprisingly no net change from 2016. I do think most enthusiasts... or I think higher than most enthusiasts on these upscale, large investment aero suspended coasters. Smooth, unique, forceful, and just overall a really great ride. The free swinging on the bank turns is just a really nice touch and unique to these types of coasters. And they're just controlled chaos, but still really enjoyable. I will say the Bat is definitely a little short, does end very quickly, but for what it's worth, and that and the really, really slow lift hill with decent views of the Great Wolf Lodge next door, as a small bonus if you're weird like me. Just, the Bat is a quality ride, and it's all alone with an extremely obnoxiously long queue in the action zone. It sits there alone, but no one's ever going to touch it. Like, please don't remove this thing, please. It's so good. It's such an underrated coaster. Oh, and speaking of suspended coasters, we have Ninja at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Yeah, I think I have every single suspended coaster credit in the United States right now. Yeah, I don't have Vampire. I think there's another one. So this is my new favorite aero suspended coaster, considering how highly I talked about the Bat in 2016. Now it's turn to talk about Ninja. I really think this thing is a lot more, I hate to say it again, but unique. Like, the very beginning part of the ride after that first lift is a drag. It's kind of slow, but during the whole ride layout, you're just going downhill, gaining more and more and more speed until you're taking those turns like a bullet. It gets crazy towards the end of the ride, and you get some good views of Tatsu, good views of Jetstream. You get to see all sorts of things since you're built literally into the hill. This thing was also a walk-on, so that's also an added bonus. I didn't go to Magic Mountain on a busy day, but this thing was a walk-on in almost every row. I don't remember what row I rode it in because I almost forgot it existed because I had to go up the M&M cheesy stairs, and I was more excited for Krypton Coaster, which ended up being a disappointment. More on that later on. But the only thing that I can complain about, I kind of like that they have a second lift hill just because they can make it longer, but they have a second lift hill. So it kind of just, you start the ride in a lift and end the ride in a lift. But all the stuff in between is fantastic. And number 63, we have my old overrated friend, the Beast. Now, like I said several times, I've reiterated it several times in this video already, and in the series, that I visited Kings Island for the second time in 2017 after the first list was posted. And after this second visit, I did gain a bit more respect for the Beast. People are still way in over their head considering saying that it's one of the best coasters in the world, but I do see where they're coming from, and I very much valued the historical significance especially. Now, I do say that it is on my bucket list to get a night ride on this, because I don't know if I've ever actually stayed into the night, late evening, twilight, even the nighttime at any other park besides home. So my night ride list is very, very short, and I've heard the night rides on this thing are one of a kind. I'm just not generally a person to stay from open to close. So a lot of my rides are in the daytime. Like I said, getting a night ride on this would be on the bucket list for a while to come. A speedy layout, dashing through the woods with, not a lot of forces, and that Rose Bowl towards the end can be kind of painful and jackhammery. There's some flaws, but I think overall this is definitely a good ride. Overrated, yes, but with the gain of 2 percentage points as well, I think it's just really good. Now, if only they can turbo jack that lift hill to where it moves faster than the bugs in the railing, whatever wasp, beetle, housefly, ladybug, whatever's on it, just make the lift move faster than them. I still nearly got stung by a wasp in my first ride, which still kind of leaves a sour taste. Moving on, we have Riddler's Revenge, the last new challenger of the video. And this is the final and best stand-up coaster on this list. Long and forceful of layout, packed full of all sorts of various elements, inversions, bank turns, and just overall just awesomeness. And this thing, when I went to Magic Mountain, like a few other coasters, was a walk-on. But this one was a walk-on on every single row. I got in, and I'm pretty sure I was only one of 8 people on the train. Or 12 people. I'm pretty sure over half the train was empty on my ride on Riddler Revenge. Granted, it was the second ride I did in the day because Tatsu third ride, because Tatsu, X2, Viper, and Apocalypse were all down until my second lap of the park. This is the third ride I did, so it's still pretty early in the morning for Magic Mountain. But needless to say, this thing is still really good. I don't think this thing should ever receive the flawless conversion. If there's going to be one stand-up coaster left on the earth, it's going to be this one. And now, finally, we have number 61 of the video, American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis. Good, quality ride, if not great, but just forgettable. Just like Six Flags St. Louis. I nearly forgot this ride existed when I was back at Six Flags St. Louis in 2015 because I was more excited about the Justice League ride that was closed the entire day I was there. I won at Great America a year later, so it didn't matter. I remember a compact, forceful layout with plenty of negative Gs and lateral Gs. Like I said, I have not visited Six Flags St. Louis since 2015, so I have yet to be able to re-ride this thing. Now that I'm in college, I'm in a closer proximity to St. Louis, so I have maybe a chance of getting there, but I doubt it. And I also have a pretty bad memory of this coaster because this was one of 2 coasters at Six Flags St. Louis that forbid any loose articles completely. They made me ride separately from my younger brother I was with. He got one train, I got the next train because we had to hold a bag and we didn't have money on us to pay for a locker because we weren't anticipating it to be like that, having been to over Georgia, which had a friendly loose article policy. We weren't expecting it, and yeah, I remember that more clearly than the actual ride experience, which either says something about the service of St. Louis or my memory on this ride experience. Love to ride it again, don't get me wrong, but yeah, my memory needs work. And on that note, that ends part 6 of my top 100 coaster countdown bonanza. Starting in part 7, we'll start to get into some real good stuff, and maybe a few shockers while I'm at it as well. We've already sifted through the coasters for this episode that are more like good, if not teetering on the edge of great. But we'll start getting to true greatness on the next episode, and therefore it's only going to get better from here in terms of the quality of the rides presented, and a few shockers will probably be thrown in there as well. So stay tuned for the part 7 whenever that comes out. My next video will very likely be the Six Flags 2020 predictions, which will probably be another laughing fest of terribly timed and terribly judged predictions. But hey, they're predictions for that reason. So, on that note, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscription. It does mean something, I guess. I haven't been getting a lot of those as of late, so it would help. And I hope you guys have a great insert unit of time here. As you can tell, it's 10:30 over here in my college town. So, on that note, I gotta go to sleep. I wish you guys peace.